Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you for inviting me to share my PhD research on green care practices in Finland. I'm very happy to be here because although I still speak almost no Finnish, I've met many of you over these 2 years and a half, so I'm very curious to hear what you think about the progress of the research so far. I want to be able to give you the full picture. It's been very intense, lots has happened. So I decided to focus very little on the concepts and theory that inspire this research and talk more about the methods that I've used with my case studies and the preliminary findings, some of the results of the research. If I talk too fast or if you don't understand, please let me know. I will leave my personal introduction to the end, and I want to start with a round of introductions of the heart of my research, which are my case studies participants. So, oh no, it doesn't go. It doesn't move. Okay, now it moves. Okay, so first of all, meet Lisa. I think many of you know her already. She's a nature entrepreneur, or as she calls herself, hyvän mielen luontonoita, a nature witch. She, together with her family, she's been running a nature tourism company in Tampere for 25 years. They provide sports, educational, leisure, and therapeutic activities in wild forests and lakes of the area. And the company is now undergoing an intergenerational shift, so it's going to be interesting to see how much green care is going to be brought forward by the new generation. They are the first nature tourism company, I think, in Finland to get the Luonnonvoima quality mark. Secondly, meet Hanna and Jukka. They manage Tikamaki Care Farm in Lempäälä, where they raise ecological sheep together with a group of mentally disabled people that work on the farm, and some of them also live on the farm. And they are supervised by a staff which is very well prepared in both health and social care, but also in animal husbandry and horticulture, etc. And as you can see, there are lots of animals, including Mina and Manu, who are the miniature pig stars of the farm. And finally, meet the people of Moriggi, a biodynamic farm at the outskirts of Helsinki metropolitan area, which produces food for markets and restaurants in Helsinki, but also for Waldorf and Steiner schools and kindergartens of the area. They've had some sort of green care projects in the past with Sipho municipality and with Sininauhalito, and now they're planning to build a care home for elderly people on the farm in the future. And this is part of a bigger redevelopment project which they are negotiating with the local municipality to avoid the municipality taking over the land and in order to save the farm, basically. So as you can see, these are very different cases of green care in Finland. And there are many reasons why I decided to work with them, but the two main important ones are, first of all, that they were very open to work with me and to experiment with a whole bunch of participatory methods. Second, they provide very interesting different perspectives to answer the main guiding question of my research, which is, can green care practices contribute to place regeneration? If you don't know what regeneration means, it's basically something that goes beyond sustainability. Sustainability often refers to interventions that aim at minimizing harm, at doing the least possible impact on the environment. Regeneration goes beyond that. Regeneration is recreating resources, both natural and social resources that can make us live better with other human beings, but also with other non-human beings and with the ecosystem. And this is best done at place-based level. We, in a way, our first place project refuses the idea that there are solutions that can be imposed on every place equally. You need to find specific solutions to the needs, capacity, assets of specific places, and so that's how we work. And there are three main point of views, three main angles from which I tried to answer this question. The first one is social entrepreneurship. So my main focus is really the practitioners, what they do, why they do it, what are the values, the visions that motivate their practices, and how they do it. Putting together what kind of collaborations, partnerships, oftentimes cross-sectorial. The second angle is place regeneration. So what are the resources that needed to be mobilized or created in places in order to make green care happen? And can this process be also beneficial to the territory, to the regional development or local development? So can it contribute to place regeneration? And finally, I look at caring, but I'm not merely interested in caring as the provision of health and care services. For me, caring is something more holistic. It's a way of living. It's an ethics and a series of practices that we can put into place every day to take care of others, but also of our places, of course, and in that way maybe promote social inclusion and connection to the ecosystem. And I don't have the chance now to go into detail, but from this idea of caring, I've also developed this idea of caring with people and for places, which is the title of my presentation. So if you want to know more about that, we can maybe discuss that later. Okay, how have I operationalized these concepts? I organized my fieldwork over the past 2.5 years in several stages. It all started in March 2016, where I first traveled across some places in Finland to understand what green care was about, how it was done, and I also talked to some experts, practitioners and researchers both in Finland and abroad, mainly in the Netherlands and in Italy, to understand what green care was actually about. And then I started my research, my actual fieldwork with my case studies, because at that point I had identified the three communities of practitioners, and my research is inspired by principles of action research, meaning that when I work with people, I don't just extract the data and then run away, but the idea is to design together the methods in a way that can be useful also for the people involved, and that can trigger a process of social learning and empowerment, hopefully. So in the March of 2017, I started interviewing the main practitioners of my cases, and also then the people that work with them at a wider scope, and I'll show you how later, using also what's called participatory mapping exercises. Then I did a small project with the mentally disabled people living in Tikamaki Care Farm called Photo Voice. And I also did 4 weeks of participant observation, meaning that I went at least for a week to each of the case studies, spent time with them, worked with them, did a lot of reading and other works in the farms and with the Nature Tourism Company. After that, I've been away for 6 months doing some traineeships in the Netherlands. I came back this summer to Finland, and in August 2018 I started a series of workshops with my practitioners. The first one was called Sharing and Reflecting. I brought them all together for the first time so that they could get to know each other and share their experiences, and I shared with them the preliminary findings of my research, but also the conceptual framework that has inspired this research in order to see how it resonated with them, what they thought about it, how it made sense, etc., etc. Then next year, the last series of workshops will be about the future. I want to sit down with each of the case study and talk about what are their visions for the future in terms of green care practices, but also how those visions can have positive impacts on place regeneration. And finally, if there is still time and budget available, I'd like to do a final series of workshops, again co-creative workshops, where we this time bring together the main practitioners but also other stakeholders who are interested in those visions and who want to be part of those future plans, and together in a way build a sense of collective vision, of collective sense making, and of collective capacity building. And I can show you later what this means. Now I'd like to focus on a few of these methods and what they yielded, so what is the outcomes. And I'll start with the interviews. So as I mentioned, I interviewed 36 people across southern Finland. You can see there the regions where I went, and you can see also the sectoral scope. So the sample of people belonged to the private sector, some from the enterprise, some from farming environments, and then also there were some civil servants, some people from the third sector, and research and education. And 3 of the total were people from the board of the Green Care Finland Association. And some of these 36 people are in this room as well. So why did I interview those? Why those 36 rather than some other people working on green care in Finland? The reason is that my case studies chose the stakeholders that I was supposed to interview, and they did that through one of the participatory mapping exercises that I mentioned earlier. So participatory mapping is a technique of involving people in a more interactive way. And this is what we did. I called it the eco-social network. Basically, I asked my main practitioners, one by one obviously, because interviews were individual, to place green care practices at the center and tell me what makes them happen. What are the institutions, the collaborations, the resources that make green care possible in their specific case. And you can see that this is just an example. They chose obviously themselves, the instructors, the clients, the farm, the animals, and also the social workers, the municipality. So you see the network of people they work with to make it happen, but also in this case a bit to a lesser extent, but in other cases lots of people also put really water, sun, and all these very material resources that are needed to make it happen. And once this was done, I went and called all these people and asked, can I interview you? Can I come to your place? And I managed to track down almost all of them and to convince them to talk to me. Finnish people are so busy all the time. But it was very interesting because, for 2 reasons. First of all, because I could understand my case studies and the places where they work, not just from the inside, but also from the perception of the outside, which is very valuable. And secondly, because I got an impression of what green care means a little bit across different sectors and how people understand green care in Finland, regardless of how familiar they are with the concepts and how much they work with it. So I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. These are some excerpts from my interviews, and you can see how the understanding of green care really differs from person to person. So one person told me, green care, I don't know what it is. I have understood that it's always for these people with some problems. Another person said, I don't know the word. It is used in nature and farm to get the great feelings and great satisfaction to our special people. Another one said, green care means taking into consideration nature values when providing the services and also using nature as a tool to rehabilitate and improve people's health. So obviously these are much more inclined towards talking about care, isn't it? But then somebody else said, actually green care, it's everything. What you eat, what you are, how you treat nature, how you waste your money, how you think about all this. But it's also for me the possibility to go out and enjoy nature and fresh air. And then another person said, the word green already points out that it is green. And that means for me that there is some green environment, and the green reminds you of the living forces in the soil. In order to keep the green, it means everything in life, including waste recycling, etc., etc. So I found this quite interesting, and maybe there is still some work to do to understand what green care means, although it's also quite nice that it's an open concept. Going back to the participatory mapping exercises, another thing I did, which was a bit of a playful experiment, I asked all the participants, all these 36 people, to identify 5 keywords and one motto, one slogan that they would use if they had to describe that specific case studies that they work with or they know to somebody that doesn't know anything about it. And this is a word cloud that came out of the keywords that certain stakeholders associated with one of my cases. And I find it very interesting because you can see how the aesthetics plays a very important role in this case, but also animals, very important, and also the idea of doing things together, of succeeding together. And that's just one example. Okay. Another thing that I asked people during the interviews was, why do you do green care? And I did that through what is called a rating scale question, meaning that you have points from 1 to 6 and you decide how important certain factors are. So I asked both the practitioners in my case studies and their external collaborators, why do you do green care, or why do you work with green care providers? And they had, as I said, a scale from 1 to 6, and they could say this factor is more or less important, that factor has been more or less important. And this was quite shocking. When I showed it to my case studies participants, they got really mad, because they thought, how come for us environmental reasons and pedagogy and education are so important when we start our green care practices, and how come they are so little important for the people that work with us? So for them this was quite surprising finding. And then, as you can see, health and well-being is important for pretty much all of them, both the main practitioners and the people working in the network. Economic reasons are less important for the main practitioners. They're always at the bottom of the list, and they are obviously a bit more important for the external network. Another thing that I asked them about the motivation, this I only asked the external network. I asked, is geographical location of the farm or the company at stake, or the human resources of that case studies, are they important for you to work with them? And all of them, obviously, as you can see, said yes, they are very important. And then I asked also, are there other reasons why you started to work with them? They said a whole bunch of reasons. I'm not going to show you all of them, but what I found interesting was that more than one person thought that place and sharing the same principles, the same values, were important factors. And this is not something I invited them to say. They voluntarily just came up with that. So for me this was quite interesting. Now, leaving behind the 36 interviews, which, by the way, accounted to 50 hours of recordings, which were very painful to transcribe, but it's also very rich material. This is something different. This is something that I did apart from that, and it's called Photo Voice. I involved the group of mentally disabled people working and somehow also living in Tikamaki Care Farm. Photo Voice is a technique that is used with vulnerable groups. Oftentimes people that cannot sustain an interview normally, or that you want to give a voice, people that are usually not listened to, whose opinion is not considered valuable enough for a reason or the other. And by giving them the camera, you give them the possibility to tell their own reality, their own story. However, when I read all the accounts of Photo Voice on the literature that exists on it, there wasn't any example of how you would do that with mentally disabled people. So it was very important for me to design the process with the social workers and with the farmers in Tikamaki to understand how to best operationalize it in practice. And what we decided together was that I would go for a week to the farm every day, participate to the normal daily routine, and then take one by one the guys who decided to participate voluntarily and go for a walk. And they already knew 5 questions. The questions were given to them 2 weeks in advance, that they could think about when taking the pictures, to trigger that photo shooting process. I had a tablet so that they could see the frame very easily. Some of them don't manage quite well with a camera, so we tried to make it as simple as possible. There was an interpreter with me speaking Finnish, and then there were also, of course, Hanna, the main farmer and social worker, in a way helping to elicit the talks. And basically afterwards I compiled individual albums with the pictures that were taken, and for each picture a caption, so a summary of what had surfaced during the walking interview. Okay, the final method I want to show you is what I call co-creation workshops. So I'm not going to go into detail about this, but basically there are moments where, as I said just now, I shared with them the findings, but in the future I want to focus more on the future of their practices. And the way I facilitate these workshops, based on some training I got on facilitation, is through this technique called Theory U, which is a technique used in organizational management and also appreciative inquiry. And these methods are very useful to create a space for a collective connection where people have the chance to use both their rationality but also their guts. So they are processes that involve also emotions. And also what happens with Theory U is that you don't just see a problem and move immediately to solving that problem. You try to see the issue from a totally different perspective. And this is best done with arts techniques, so with creative techniques. The picture you see there is from the workshop I did in August, and we were playing with the soil, the living soil of my big farm, to create some forms. That's just an example. But basically, if you want to know more about this, we have published a toolkit with some other of my colleagues. It's called Arts-Based Methods for Transformative Engagement. I know there are many educators in this room and also people who work in teams, so you're welcome to go and check it out. It's fully downloadable for free on our website. And one of the things that we discussed during one of these workshops this last August was this idea of, we discussed many things, but I just want to show you one because I think it might be interesting. We discussed this idea of resources. So I mentioned earlier that I want to understand what resources in places are helping, enabling green care practices to happen, but at the same time, if these resources can help places to thrive, to develop better. And what surfaced from all the interviews that I did in the past is that to make green care happen, you need a lot of resources, which are not necessarily only material, so they're not just finances or natural resources, but they are also social, of course, so all those networks and all those relationship of trust and solidarity that you need to build. But also there are affective resources. Emotions plays a huge role in the cases of my entrepreneurs. Not, for example, joy when they do the practices, hope that the world will be a better place through their agency, but also grief and fear for their place, for their farm that might be taken over, and therefore green care can help give a second chance to this place. So just to give you a hint of that. And then there are obviously very important ethical values all the time in inspiring and really guiding forward the practices. Educational. My practitioners talk all the time about learning, the constant learning process that you need to go through when being a green care entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in general. And cognitive resources, the idea that green care is becoming more and more supported in Finland and all over the place, and in my view it's also a bit too much romanticized sometimes, and regulatory. So obviously laws are very important to support this field. However, so far they haven't been very supportive at all, at least from my findings. So my case studies really hope that this is going to happen more and more in the future. Okay, so I'm almost done. Who has funded this research? This is funded by the European Union. It's a project called SOSPLACE, which stands for Sustainable Place Shaping. It's a Marie Curie innovative training network. It's a network of institutions. We are 15 researchers all over Europe, but it's only me focusing on green care. What else? Well, I'm based at Lucca. My project is funded from 2016 to 2019, so my contract actually is almost over. I just applied to Kone Foundation and Cultural Foundation to get a final year of funding, fingers crossed. And then I'm external PhD candidate in Wageningen University at the Rural Sociology Group. My supervisor in Finland is Katriina Soini. In the Netherlands, my promoter is Professor Bettina Bock, and my co-supervisor is Dr. Dirk Röp. And I'm also affiliated to Ca' Foscari University of Venice, which is where I used to work before. Before joining SOSPLACE and moving to Finland, I've worked for many years in social sustainability, also from a research perspective, but I was working in China, so you can imagine the different perspectives compared to Finland. And what's going to happen next? How are you going to, if you want, to learn more about this research? Well, first of all, I'm going to publish several papers in international journals, and then my PhD thesis sometime will see the light. And I plan to write a stakeholders report on green care practices in Finland, together with other experts here, maybe Katriina Soini and Elina Hemasto, and some other people. And this is meant to be something that reaches out to a wider audience with an accessible language for everybody, not just for academia. And also, we are writing a children's book, which might sound crazy, but we are a bit crazy. So we are writing stories inspired by our research. My story is inspired by green care in Finland. It's been a hell of a process. It's really hard to translate academic concepts into a good story. But we are managing, we are having professional coaches that are helping us towards the process of storytelling. And my story, just to give you a little bit of a hint, it's in the forest. There is a hero, of course. There is a nature witch, of course. There is a flying squirrel, a cow moose, and many other interesting things happening. So I hope you might be able to read it. It's going to be also full Creative Commons, because we want to really spread our, well, what we can do as far as we can, and it's going to be published in spring 2019. And finally, I'm part of both a scientific and organizing committee of the final event of SOSPLACE, which is going to take place in Tampere next May. So if you want to join, have a look at the website. We're still hoping to get more contributions for people to participate. It's not just for researchers, it's for everybody. I think I'm done. I thank you for your attention. I'm very eager to hear your thoughts, questions, criticism, and please keep in touch. Here's my email. I share my research all over the place, my past research, but also the present and future. Soon there's going to be a website, and if you want to download the toolkit or know more about the children's book or read our blogs, go on sosplace.net. It's the website of the project. And yes, thank you.